Thank you very much, and hello, everybody. Thanks for being here. Before I did these things, or I was affiliated with these groups, I also had another organization in Belgium called EVA, Ethical Vegetarian Alternative. And I see that's the mafia boss in the middle, that's me. And I led that organization for 15 years. I was the director and I was the manager, so to speak. And 15 years later, 3 years ago, I had a burnout and I left it. And I've been thinking since, like, what caused my burnout? And there were many things. But one of the things, or my general conclusion was, I'm not a person who has to be or who should be a leader. And the reason for that is that I doubt too much. I'm basically too uncertain. And when my colleagues were polled, were surveyed about me, how I did as a leader, I mean, they generally liked me, fortunately. But one of the things that came out was we don't get enough clarity. We don't get enough direction. And I was thinking, like, how can I give these people direction? How can I tell them what to do if I don't know myself, And recently I posted on my Facebook, when people tell me they're not sure they agree with what I'm saying, I usually tell them I'm not sure I agree with what I'm saying either. And my best friend, the chief commissioner of the vegan police, he said about this quote, he put it on his wall, and he said, if you need a reason not to listen to anything the misnomered vegan strategist says, then this has to be it. If he doesn't agree with what he's saying, why is he saying it? Right? And so this shows that people like certainty. You have to give them some certainty. You have to show them that you're sure, or at least pretend that you are sure. And for me, that's very difficult, to pretend I'm sure when I'm not. And to be sure and to be confident, to be sure, is very important, is useful. Is useful especially for us when we're such a tiny movement in such a world of, well, unpleasant things that we are trying to change. So it is very useful. And I will make sure that you don't leave here with only doubt. But what I see in the world is too many people being too sure of their opinion. Too many people being too sure of their opinion. Like this guy here, like people on Facebook who are fighting all the time because each of them thinks they are sure of their opinion. And when people are very convinced and very sure, that can lead to very bad things. And you may think this is a bit over-dramatized, but that is what happens in different groups and cultures, etc., when people do not doubt anymore. And again, it's good that we are confident and that we are sure of our case. But sometimes I worry a bit that we become overconfident, especially when we have reason to be more bold. We see more successes. We see more people joining us, and there is a risk that we might become too bold and too overconfident. So I'm here to tell you that some doubt is a good thing. Some doubt is good because, well, first of all, we might be mistaken about things. The world is very complex, and we get new information all the time. We are prone to groupthink. We are prone to think what our group thinks, and we sometimes afraid to deviate from what the group thinks, right? And we're part of an ideology. Veganism is a very beneficial, I think, ideology, but it's still an ideology. And sometimes it is hard to think out of the box. Secondly, we ask other people to change their mind about meat eating, about eating animal products. So we have to be able to change our minds too, and to think and to doubt. And thirdly, I think we can be paradoxically more convincing when we seem less convinced, if that makes sense. Let me show you this with an example. Do you know this beer? You know, this is a world famous slogan, but I deleted one word. Do you know what it is? Yeah, the original slogan is probably. And I think this slogan sounds much better than this one, right? It shows like, well, probably, we think so. And that's why you kind of like tend to believe them, right? So this is about changing your mind. And I think we have to constantly be at least open to change our mind. We have to constantly be open to update ourselves. We have to basically be like Windows, constantly updating. Okay? It's very annoying. It's constantly doing that these days. Mac users, okay, same thing, right? We have to be constantly open to change our mind, constantly daring to take the red pill, to be less comfortable than we might be when we are sure of our opinions. And so I'd like to ask you, are there vegan or animal rights issues that you ever change your mind about? You don't have to answer right now, but you can think about this tonight in your bed. Have I ever changed my mind? And it's always a good idea to ask that question. It shows that you're remaining critical, remaining open-minded. So let me tell you about some things that I changed my view about. And this is, the first thing is a kind of a meta thing. I always believe that we are the ones with the clear view. We are the ones with the right intentions. We are the ones with the only right, very clear agenda. And when we look at the other players, our opposition, those big companies with their big budgets, they have these billions of dollars or euros or zlotys, and they try to convince people to eat more meat. And we all know that it is just for profit. And whenever they talk about taste or health or whatever, basically comes down to profit. And contrast that to us, who with our small budgets are also trying to influence people. And we are thinking that, well, we are doing it for the animals. And that is true. And we have a very clear agenda. We want a vegan world, and we want to help animals, right? And insofar as we're talking about animals, I think we're right. That is our agenda. We're very clear. We're unbiased. But when we talk about health, it becomes another thing. If we're honest, people here at an animal rights conference care about animals most of all, right? So when we talk about health, we want to lead the argument to zero animal consumption, right? Same thing when we talk about the environment. We say that for the environment, the best thing is to consume zero animals. Is that true? I think it's good to recognize our biases there. And even when we talk about animals, we all have this abolitionist agenda, and we sometimes have a hard time to recognize improvements for animals that don't seem to or that are not equal to abolition. Can you see that? I'll come back to that later. So what's important is that we are careful that we don't jump from one box to another, right? That we can, even when we move from the carnistic box to the vegan box, we can think out of the box. We can remain open-minded. So my updated view, rather than to think that we are the ones with the clear view, is that we're much more biased than we think. And it's good to investigate those biases, because if we investigate them, we can talk with more conviction, with more truth, and we can influence, I think, a lot more people. The second one is, it all depends on us. That was what I used to believe. This vegan movement, it's us who have to save the animals. And that's a very heavy burden to carry. And it's true that until recently, this was the only group of people that helped farmed animals. But more recently, we were helped or joined by sustainability organizations, planet environmental organizations, and health organizations. And they're also giving a message of reduce your consumption of animal products, right? And they're also helping farmed animals. And still more recently, we were joined by the whole business sector, by the whole vegan economy or veg economy, right? And these companies are helping us tremendously in going towards our goal. If you look at Beyond Meat, and this is actually from January, before they went to the stock market, they sold already 25 million vegan burgers. Now there's much more. Can you imagine the impact that it has? Like, you have a good product and you give it to people to taste, how much of an impact that can have on them. So fortunately, they are our allies. If you look at the global milk consumption, worldwide milk consumption of fluid milk, of every 100 liters that is sold, 12 to 13% is already plant-based milk. That's great. We're nowhere there with meat substitutes. That is not because of us. That is because of health issues that people have, because they like different tastes, because all kinds of reasons. So here too, we are helped, for instance, by health organizations. So what this comes down to is that we see ourselves working together with other groups or factions in society. And we want to show people that it's unethical to eat animal products. These organizations are at least showing that eating too much of them is unsustainable, and businesses like Beyond Meat want to make it redundant to eat animal products. So rather than thinking, as I used to do, that it all depends on us, I now think we are just one important part of it. And that's a relief, actually, that we don't have to do it all alone and that we're getting a lot of help. Thirdly, I used to believe it's all about personal change, and I see a lot of emphasis today still on that. And you all know the quote by Gandhi, "Be the change that you wish to see in the world." You know, if you want to seem good and wise, you quote Gandhi, right? If you want to be seen as intelligent, you quote Einstein, right? So this quote, it sounds very good. It sounds beautiful, and I see it on all kind of bags and T-shirts and everywhere in the vegan movement. Be the change that you want to see in the world. But we forget that this personal change, to change personally before the rest of the world has changed, is very difficult for most people. It wasn't for us, but for most people, it is difficult. It is going uphill. As long as we don't reach the tipping point, it is going uphill. And we as a vegan movement are often not making this personal change any easier, because we're saying it's not a diet and it's not a phase and it's a permanent lifestyle change and it has to be 100%. You know, we're not making it easier for people to make that personal change. So what is there in addition to personal change? There is, of course, institutional change. And I think a nice example of that is this. There was a poll in the US that showed that half of the people in the US want to end slaughterhouses. Half of the people want to end slaughterhouses. And the people who published this poll, who were surveying the participants, they couldn't believe these results. And just to be sure, they checked with the people who had responded, and they asked, were you aware that slaughterhouses are where livestock are killed and processed into meat, and that without them, you would not be able to consume meat? Strangely, some people said, no, I wasn't aware of that. But still, a lot of people, many more than there are vegans, remained in favor of the closing of slaughterhouses. What does this mean? I think it means that many people, in theory, agree with some things, but would only follow if this is applied for everybody. If a government says you have to do this, then many people will say, I will go along because I thought this was a bad idea from the beginning anyway. But I won't do it alone. Imagine, for instance, that it would be good to pay more. I mean, it is not imaginable, it is true. Suppose that you have the opportunity to pay more taxes voluntarily for developmental aid or something. Are you going to do that? Few people are going to do that, are going to voluntarily say, I'm going to pay more taxes. But once the government says we're going to increase taxes for developmental aid, you might say, yeah, I go along with that. If everybody does it with me, I'll go along. So what happens here is that this scale, or this uphill walk, when we attach an institutional weight to it, you know, we change institutions, we change laws, we change schools and cafeterias and universities and all kinds of things, then it becomes a lot more gradual, and eventually it becomes like even, and it becomes a lot more easier to change personally as well. And in the end, it's going to be like this. And this is going to become the way of least resistance, right? So rather than believing, as I did, that it's all about personal change, I believe now that personal change is very hard for most people, not for everybody, but for most people, without institutional change. Next thing, veganism is the answer to everything, right? I'm not saying I was as radical as this. Have you seen this before? So what animals need, they don't need vegetarianism, they don't need lab-grown meat, they don't need donations, they don't need petitions, they don't even need love or compassion, they need veganism, right? I used to believe something like that, like that's all that mattered. And I was trying always to influence people to go vegan. And I still get this question from people. They ask vegans, asking me like, you know, I have this friend and they're like vegan, except for they still eat this or that. How can I convince them to go entirely vegan? And I would have given some advice in the past. And today I say, like, why bother? Move on to the next person, please, you know? So if people are almost there, that's fantastic. I'm not going to bother with the last percentage. I'm going to move on to the next person. So I like very much this quote that is from another movement, from the no waste movement. Maybe you've seen it. We don't need a handful of people doing zero waste perfectly. We need millions of people doing it imperfectly, right? We'll get there if we have enough people doing enough of the thing. I don't know how high the percentage has to be, but for instance, maybe it's like this. If we can make 70% of the people go 70% vegan, then the rest will take care of itself. Maybe it's 80%, maybe it's 90, maybe it's 60, I don't know. But it's not necessary to focus on making sure that everybody around us goes vegan. There might be more interesting and more impactful things to do, right? So rather than saying that veganism is the answer, I now think that we might be focusing a bit too much on veganism. The next point, as all of you, I think, believed at some point or still believe, I believe that animal rights are what matters. And we all know the discussion between welfare versus rights, right? And we all know that there is a difference. Of course, there is a difference. The one thing is, rights ultimately is about abolition and giving animals the right not to be used at all and the right to freedom, while welfare is about continuing to use these animals, but with them leading improved, better lives with higher welfare. And I agree with that distinction, and I think that distinction is important. But we shouldn't take it too far. And what I see us doing, and what I did myself, was to think that between this and this, there is no difference. Or to not recognize the advantages of this. Or to not see the difference between this and this. Yes, these animals are still used and they will still be killed, and that's wrong. And we don't like that, and we want to abolish that. But to deny that there's a difference and to see this as an improvement, I think is completely absurd. And that would be, I think, a betrayal of the animals, to not recognize that this is much better for them, at least, for the ones who are there now. So rather than to think that animal rights are what matters, I now think, yes, of course it matters. Of course, the rights matter, but well-being is really important too. And I wonder at what point welfare actually became a dirty word in our movement. It should not be. Well-being or welfare is what ultimately we're all after. Number 6 is that I used to think that it's about righting our own wrongs, to clean up after our own mess. That was the only important thing to do. So again, this picture, we've caused this, we're going to solve this. And sure, that's our priority. But then I wonder, should we also not solve things that we did not cause? This is a bit of a sad image, I'm sorry for that, but you may have seen it, right? This polar bear stumbling around, too weak to find food. And it went around the world, this picture, and it went around the world as a warning about global warming. This was, people said, the consequence of global warming. This polar bear could not find food anymore because of the consequences of global warming. That may be true, but I read an interpretation or an explanation of a biologist who specialized in that region and in those animals. And he said, well, that's actually false. This is the way that these animals die. Anyway, whether there's global warming or not, they die from becoming very weak and becoming so weak that they can no longer find food. So what I'm saying is, if you see this as the consequences of global warming, it is through a human mistake or a human error. If this is just the way nature works or the way things are in nature, don't we have to solve it as well? If we care about this animal, if we care about well-being, right? In nature, there is starvation, disease, predation, cold and drought, parasites, all these horrible things, right? Just think about that there's no dentist in nature. Just think that if you break your leg as an animal, what's going to happen? You're going to be in a lot of pain. Just think that dying in nature, we think of dying from old age, but it's never just from old age. It's probably often going to be a painful process. So I think that we should do something about that too. And this animal here may have all the rights in the world, but what are rights without well-being? You know, what is its freedom worth, or her or his freedom worth, without enough well-being? So rather than to think that it's just about righting our own wrongs, I think we should definitely care about wild animal welfare too. And I think this is actually the next frontier. Next point is probably the most controversial. I used to think that no form of domestication is ever okay. And now I'm not sure what I think about that anymore. Let me ask you a question that is asked to us frequently by meat eaters. What would happen to all the animals if the world went vegan? Right? You've heard that before, right? One answer is, they will take over the world. That's obviously not going to happen. The other answer is, and that's more true to life probably, they will go extinct. These cows and these pigs, etc., they might go extinct. Is that true? It's closer to the truth, I think, than the first answer. Let me show you which beings in big categories are on this planet. There are people, they are pets. I know companion animals is the better word, but I couldn't fit that in the circle. There are farmed animals. There are wild animals. The proportions are just approximate. There are liminal animals. Does anybody know what liminal animals are? Yeah, they're neither wild nor domesticated. So they are like pigeons and rats, and they like use the leftovers of human waste and food for their survival. So they kind of depend on us, but they are free, basically, so to some extent. And then one very small category are animals living on sanctuaries, right? And now my question is, in the end, I think, and it may sound arrogant, but whether we want it or not, to a high extent, it's going to be humans who are going to decide which animals are on this planet and how they are going to live here and how we are going to relate to them, right? And so we have to answer which of these categories do we want in the world and how many of these animals do we want and how are we going to relate to them. Some vegans are against companion animals. We definitely are against farmed animals, but I just showed you that wild animals don't have a very great life either. And the liminal animals I'm not so sure about. It seems that the best lives here, like one question could be to you, if you could decide in your next life in which category you would be reborn, just a broad category, I don't think that's a very easy question to answer. I mean, yeah, sanctuary. I would say sanctuary animal. Right? But without a sanctuary animal, it's a very hard question. So sanctuaries are, I think, where we would see some animals that are left after the world is vegan, but probably they would disappear as well after some point where there's no animals to be saved anymore. So if you look at it, these farmed animals, we want them to disappear. We want, some of us want the pets to disappear, the companion animals. The sanctuary animals will disappear if there's no farmed animals anymore. Maybe the liminal animals, we want to clean them up or we want them around or we don't think they have a good enough life, so we want to limit them. So there would be maybe only the wild animals left. Is that the ideal situation? Right? So I was thinking maybe there is a form of living together with animals that benefits everybody. So humans could give to animals food and shelter and protection from predators and medical care. Imagine that you are a chicken and it lives in a very wide space and you don't even know that you're not entirely free. Maybe a chicken doesn't know, I don't know. And just imagine you're not killed. To me, that seems one of the best possible lives on this planet, actually, right? Because in the wild, animals don't have this. And then in return, maybe animals could give something back to humans. Companionship, manure, maybe wool, maybe some eggs, I don't know, right? It's a very hard question to solve because we cannot ask for their, what they think, for their opinion, right? But in any case, I think it is worthwhile to start thinking about this because a vegan world is becoming more and more of a possibility. And then we have to start thinking about what exactly will that look like. I think definitely we need to remain around animals somehow. I think that's good for everybody, or that can be good for everybody. In a better world, that can be good for everybody. It wouldn't be fun without any animals, right? So rather than thinking, as I used to, that no form of domestication is ever okay, I now wonder, maybe there is something like a wonderful form of symbiosis where animals and humans live together without anybody being killed, but in some kind of form of mutual respect. The next to last point is this one, which I've talked about before. I used to think that I shouldn't care about money. Money I saw something as something bad, something evil, as something wrong to occupy yourself too much with. And you remember, I told you if you want to look wise and good, you quote Gandhi. I've found another quote here. I don't know if it's actually his, maybe it's apocryphal. But he said, be the change you want to see in the world. And if you can be that change, then either get out of the way of the person who wants to be that change or support the individual with your financial resources. I don't know if you ever said that, but that's the internet told me, right? But in any case, it rings true to me. And we know that a lot of people are supporting this animal rights movement with a lot of money. And thanks to that, we have a lot of freedom to build campaigns and to hire workers, to hire staff, etc. And I used to think that it was unethical to care too much about money. And now I think it's unethical not to care. Because with money, you can do a lot of things. Whether you like it or not, in this world, money is a key to change. And we have to respect that. We have to appreciate that, I think. And if you learn something about money, you can do a lot of good with it, possibly. The last point, this dream that we have for animals, I used to think that it would take a long time to realize it. This question, when it was asked to me by journalists and people, will we ever stop consuming animal products? I had a tentative yes as an answer. But that was a yes that was thinking about a utopian future centuries from now. Something like this, like science fiction, really. But so many things have been happening since. This is just from this week. Smithfield, whether you like it or not, a very large pork producer, they are now putting their own brand of vegan products on the market. You've seen maybe this Super Bowl ad for Beyond Meat, for the Beyond Burger, right? Prime time on TV, the most expensive slot, now is filled with an ad for a vegan product. I was walking around in Warsaw yesterday, and next to the steakhouse, I saw an Otwarte Klatki ad. Hopefully it doesn't give the impression, don't eat chicken, eat steak. It's a bit maybe unfortunately placed. But just the fact that we have this money now, we have this means now to bring this really in the public eye. This was 10 years ago. We could never, ever see an animal rights advert, maybe one of PETA now and then. But otherwise, no organization had the funds to do that. And most of all, this question, will we ever stop eating meat or animal products, is being taken seriously now. It is being expressed and taken seriously in major newspapers and media. And it is more and more this question more and more being answered in the negative. Here, for instance, former CEO of Tyson Foods, the future of food might be meatless. So I told you that some doubt is good, some doubt, not too much. If you doubt too much, you will be paralyzed by analysis. Maybe the effective altruism people in the room know about that, about analyzing too much and not doing shit, right? This graph shows it very nicely. Time cost, strategy A, strategy B, analyzing whether it's strategy A or B that we should follow, right? So we should not doubt too much. Another way of putting this or illustrating this is a wonderful quote, I think, by Bertrand Russell. It's wonderful because it's so true, I think, and it's horribly true. He says, the whole trouble with the world is that the stupid are cocksure and the intelligent are full of doubt, right? Remember Trump? So we should not be full of doubt. So let me end this with some things that I'm sure about. What I do know for sure is that what we're doing to farmed animals is terrible, that this is a fight worth fighting, that we don't need to eat animal products or use animals, that more and more people are becoming aware of this, that most people, and I really believe that most people can find within themselves enough compassion to change. And most of all, that we are an incredibly dedicated bunch of people who will just change this thing or die trying. So rather than thinking that it will take centuries, I now believe that we, or at least you who are younger than I, may live to see it, may live to see this vegan world. Thank you very much.
It works. So if you have any questions, just raise your hand and I will get to you with the mic.
I made them doubt too much.
Yeah, probably. Anyone? Okay.
Thank you. I don't know actually if I have a question. It's more like a comment about animal welfare, because I'm sure nobody here doubts about that animals have their own right to live. And within that right, we want them to have as much welfare as possible.
Sure.
But the expression welfare is double, because we want animals to have welfare like humans need welfare, but it's the industry that promoted that expression, animal welfare, and they want us to believe in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree to a certain extent. I also think that a lot of us, or a part of us, are denying the improvements, and that's just what I'm talking about. And I just agree that, yeah, of course, that rights and welfare are different, and welfare may be abused by some people and by some companies, etc. But that's not a reason to deny that higher level welfare is a better thing for animals. Yeah, that's what it is. Thank you.
Any other question? Okay.
I have a question about the wild animals. Do you think we should deal with the problem of the so-called farm animals first, or should we deal with both of the problems of farm animals and wild animals at the same time now?
Yeah, there's a lot of, there's some research being done. I would say, my personal opinion, there's several reasons why we should focus on farmed animals the most at this point. We've created our mess. It is much more solvable, right? But we should not neglect at this point, I think, wild animal suffering. It's good to spend at least some resources towards and start investigating and start researching, that is something that we are doing, and maybe start within the animal rights movement, start making sure that the minds are ripening or maturing to this idea. That's what I would do. I would not put too much tofu in that basket, but it's difficult to solve at this point. I think technology will give us better means to do that in the future.
Okay, I have one question because I agree with you completely about these wild animals that are suffering right now. But I would like to ask you a question if we should address this problem to also meat eaters, because right now more and more people understand that eating meat is bad and animals that are killed for meat is bad. But I think that some people would consider us a little bit not thinking properly. I don't know how to call it better, but maybe they will call us crazy, that we want to change biology, that we want to change the way the animals live in the forest. I hope I explained it well.
I'm not sure I understand. Are you talking about wild animals or?
Yes, if we should address this problem to the wider audience, and also if we should do it, even though we know that some people will call it crazy, that we want to change the biology.
Change the biology of like predators, you mean?
The change the way the wild works right now.
Yeah, or the biology, you mean the environment, nature
yes,
in general,
yes,
not
yes.
the biology of individuals. Yes. It does. It may sound crazy, yes, and we have to be careful with the way we express that. But I think there's ways to explain to people, to show them that this is a rational thing, and that I think it's possible to explain to people that well-being is important. It's also possible to show to people that, look, we're already doing this. We're already interfering in nature with success to some extent in some places, like. In big parks in some countries in Africa, for instance, we are interfering in the sense that we are, rather than letting animals die of starvation when there's too many or there's not enough food, or rather than killing them, mercy killing them, euthanizing them, we do contraception. We make sure that not too many of them are being born. That's an intervention. That's maybe messing with that ecosystem, but that might be done successfully, and I think there's a rational argument for that. Yeah.
Okay. No.
About the welfarist approach, one of the abolitionists, what they say is that this might prolong, make that movement to stay, and that's the risk, that if we just stay with that, we are just conforming with the welfarist movement, then there won't be any more improvements.
Yeah.
Or we won't abolish.
Yeah. So what you're saying is, we're afraid that people will think like, okay, this is okay, the welfare is high enough, we don't need to abolish, right? And I think that's something that all of us are a bit afraid of, and it makes some sense. I don't think that's been proven at all. I think there's good arguments to the contrary also. And I think that we also have no other option but to try to improve the lives of the animals that are there right now. We also do that with political prisoners, for instance. Even though we want them out of the cage or out of the prisons, we try to improve their lives where they are. We try to give them better food, etc. So I think there's no other option. I think also that this is maybe a gradual process of making people care about the animals' well-being, about making them care about spending a little bit more money on these products, etc., and then maybe eventually ending up in people caring so much that they say, like, why should I actually kill those animals? Why should I continue to eat them? So I also believe that it could be an evolutionary process that goes in the direction of abolition, in the direction that we want. But to be entirely honest, I mean, we don't really absolutely know what is happening there or what will happen. I think my guess is that with some people it may lead to complacency. With many other people it will not, and it will be leading to more awareness. In any case, when we talk about welfare things with undercover investigations, etc., it raises the consciousness, it raises the knowledge that people have about these things, and I'm certain that these things don't harm us.
Cheers, thanks. Just a quick one. Like, I often have faced this issue that a lot of environmental and health organizations would rather talk about cattle and red meat, while a lot of us here trying to improve the welfare of chickens primarily. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think that's why we need to be involved in these environmental and health conversations. And I think it's hard to do as an animal rights organization because you will also always seem to have a hidden agenda. But for instance, organizations like ProVeg and Good Food Institute, they're taking the animal factor a bit out of the equation. Not entirely, but to some extent, and they come across as more convincing and more credible in terms of health and environment. And for instance, with Greenpeace, we are working together with Greenpeace, with WWF, and other stakeholders in the environmental world or sector, and we are making sure that it's not just a matter of shifting from red meat to white meat, because as you're rightly saying, that's a very bad thing, but to do it on the whole with all animal products, and that seems to be working.
Unfortunately, we ran out of time, so I have a quick announcement. We have a short survey on how to improve the CARE conference next times. So Julia in the green sweater will stand right next to the door, and she will give it to you, and then you can leave it here. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, just a quick announcement about this. Tomorrow at 7 in the restaurant Leonardo Verdi, I'm presenting the Polish edition of my book for the people who are from Poland. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.